Welcome to Soltron. This is my video review for my custom Liger Convoy. Here's how he scales with some other Beast Wars Transformers. I think he's pretty good scale for Optimus Primal, maybe like if he evolved into this, but he's a little bit too big to scale with Megatron. And here's how he scales with my other Beast Wars Zoids figures. He's probably the smallest of the Beast Wars figures. And I just want to appreciate him with Nemesis Prime. I think they look pretty good together. And with Beast Wars Z Galvatron, I think they pair together really well. They look like arch enemies, like polar opposites. Alright, so let's take a look at the head here. So I used an Ultra Magnus RID head, and then I gave him a new faceplate and a head crest to differentiate him. But I think his aesthetics are pretty good. His back is a little bit of a mess. I wish these thrusters could both just like sit on the back of his shoulders here, but the whole neck of the Liger gets in the way, so you can't really have it be symmetrical. So that's unfortunate. I like how these little things become his hip skirts in the back. But I think that's a pretty good aesthetic. The white works really well for him, and then he's got a couple of little accent colors here and there. And then he's got silver for the crotch and bicep, and then a little bit of silver there. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how this guy turned out, and I think the head sculpt is pretty unique. And then I really like the metallic gold eyes. So he's only got like a couple of little gimmicks really, but his head's on a ball joint, so you get a lot of articulation there. And then his waist is also on a ball joint, so that gives him some expression. And that can, of course, rotate around. And then his shoulders, of course, ball joints. And then elbows, also ball joint to give him full expression. And then the wrist, same thing. And then the claws, they do open up and spread out, so you can get him into some fighting poses. And then the hips, also ball joints, of course. And then he's got just a regular joint on the knee, which gives you about 90 degrees, and then ball joint ankles. And then, of course, the claws for his feet can also open up. And because with all that articulation, you get some pretty decent looking fighting poses out of him. The tail is kind of a pain because it only moves up that far, so it does kind of get in the way of straightening him out, because it barely clears the ground when he's standing normally. But I think he's got pretty good aesthetics. He's a little bit blockier than I would have liked, so I gave him this V chest to try to make him look a little bit more dynamic. But actually his standing poses look pretty good if his fighting poses are a little bit lackluster. So that's a pretty cool look for him. And then he does have a couple other little gimmicks, like the fins on the Liger head can kind of fan out. And then a more interesting gimmick is there's a... Let me bring this in closer here. There's a little face under the Liger fin, so you can take out that extra face, and it just sticks on with magnets there. So that face was on the back of the Liger head, and you can take off his regular faceplate. You get this crazy looking face, and then you put on the alternate head, and that just fits in there nice and snug with magnets. And now you get his face without the faceplates. Oh, and I forgot to mention that he's got, of course, hand articulation and finger articulation. So he can get some pretty neutral poses too, where he doesn't look so aggressive. But I think this is a pretty good look for him. He looks really young. But of course that was made with the Ultra Magnus head. But I think it suits him pretty well. And then you can take the faceplate, and that can just store back behind the Liger head back here. And then you can just lower the fin to kind of hide it. So I'm pretty proud of that gimmick. It worked out really nicely, and it was a really hard work cutting off his face. But yeah, so that's how this figure looks. I think he came out pretty nice. He's one of my older customs, but I think he still holds up pretty well. So transforming him is really easy. He basically just gets on all fours with not very much extra steps. So you're going to rotate his head 180 degrees. And then you can get the beast mode head ready and get that oriented in the correct direction. And it's got this extending slider so it can give him, so it doesn't block his shoulder and he can use his shoulder normally. So then you just kind of line up where the beast head's going to end up, which is right there. And then you have to pull out his waist from his torso. So you just grip that and then give it a tug. And of course I yanked him in half. I've done this transformation a lot and that's never happened, so I have to reinsert this ball joint and fix him. Okay, I know what I did wrong. So usually I push his head down as I pull his waist, and that will slide up his whole chest section. So there we go, it's lit up nicely without any violence. And then this random piece just fell off, so that's nice. Okay, so I had to glue in this little piece. It's just this little panel right here that I actually assembled today, but it was holding in, so I didn't think I needed to super glue it, but now it's glued in there. So it's right there, and hopefully that glue dries during this review. So then we just move his arms forward, and then you're going to rotate his fist forward and then open his palms. And then you do the same thing for the other fist. And then you can see he's kind of taking shape. You get this thruster, you just rotate it 180 around, and then this thruster, same thing. And then you put these vents back. Take this, and because the chest slid up, it hides his head very nicely. So now you got the Liger head covering over his robot head. So you got, that's looking good so far. And then you just fix up the back. Legs is really easy. I'm just going to rotate those forward and then bend them on the knee joint all the way. And then there's another joint in the shin, and you bend that forward to get a more natural beast joint. And then you take these back panels, and that's just going to fill up the hip. And then there's basically what he's going to look like transformed. Alright, just cleaned him up a little bit, and this is how he looks now. So I think he looks really good. His midsection here is a little bit narrow, but that's expected when you pull that whole section out. But I think he looks really excellent. Like, he barely even looks like a transformer. I had to take this armor off because the Liger head gets in the way there, but that armor is still around. You could just peg that in place, but that is like parts forming. And yeah, I think this guy turned out really good. He barely looks like a transformer. You just got some of that thigh right there, but everything else just looks like the original Liger figure. And then of course you get good articulation, so he can reach his paw forward and do a slash. And then he's got his jaw and a couple ball joints in the neck, so you can get some good articulation. You can have him look left and right. And then even look, if you wanted to, you can have him look up a little bit. And then his fins all come out in this mode too. I guess he did that in the show, I don't remember. And then his thrusters open up, and those can be positioned in different positions to look a little bit more dynamic. And then you can get a good amount of downward motion too. So a lot of articulation on this guy for some really dynamic posing. Here's how he looks with the Nemesis saber. So definitely a little bit smaller. I actually really like how simple Liger Convoy's transformation is compared to these other guys. And then here's how he is with Cerberus, who's really complicated and difficult. And here's how he looks with the Beast Wars Z's Galvatron. So I think they look pretty cool together. And you remember, if you watched that video, I also broke this guy while I was doing the review, so that's pretty cool. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this custom. It's been a long time in the making, but I feel satisfied that he's finally done. And I'll see you in the next one.